Good morning, everybody, and good morning out to you in the Webernet, wherever you may be. Thank you for tuning in. So before I start, I just want to reflect on something, which is something that is remarkable, I believe, that makes us so human, is our capacity for art. Because when we're in the experience of art, our perception changes. And everything is at risk. Kind of like this talk. You know, I had a whole beginning for this talk. And then I listened to Daniel's song. And he's truly an artist. And all of a sudden, how I wanted to start became totally irrelevant. But I will forge on. Because I'm here. And I want to start with a thought, and this is kind of where I wanted to begin, but I'm going to go a little bit differently, which is that we all have a soundtrack in our life, right? You know, that playlist in your head that you listen to, songs that remember things or cause you to remember certain things, songs that trigger certain things, you know, when you're cleaning your house, the songs that you like to hear, if you're working out, or the things that you do, right? And then all of a sudden, I hear Daniel's song and I'm thinking, I'm going to rearrange my playlist. Because it reminded me of something that I am present to in my own life. Which is my struggle, my love affair, this on-again, off-again thing that I have with New Thought. So let me start by saying this, my first heresy of the morning, which is I kind of consider myself New Thought's prodigal son. Because I struggle with a lot of what is called New Thought that I'm not sure that it is. Or maybe it hasn't evolved. So a couple examples maybe is that oftentimes I see practitioners of New Thought kind of promoting a level of self-absorption. It's all about me. It's about parking places and princesses or princes and palaces and what can I create? What can I have? Me. And I struggle with that because, you know, at a deeply mystical level, we all know that there really isn't even a me, but that each of us are deeply interconnected to every little thing that is going on. You know, Dr. Holmes says that we see the condition outside and we heal it on the inside. And this is how we regenerate the planet, right? By allowing ourselves to be present, not so much to what's in it for me, but what have I been created to be? You know, Pierre Teilhard de Chardin says this. He says, the deeper I descend into myself, the more that I find God at the heart of my being. The deeper I descend into myself, the more I find God at the heart of my being. Another struggle that I have with New Thought often is there's not a lot of intellectual rigor. And if I was to be perfectly honest, there hasn't been a lot of novelty in our thinking in the past, 50 years, 60 years. You know, we're kind of caught into these things like, you know, God is principle, God is omnipresent, omniscient, whatever the other one is. Present, something. Well, you know. But, you know, does that even fit? Is it even relevant? How does that help somebody who is in pain to say things like, it was meant to be? Oh my God, it was meant to be, or other sort of magical thinking. I guess that's my third critique, magical thinking. You know, we just kind of make stuff up. It's build that they will come. What? So you have been my friends, and I've been coming here for the last year. And so you know that I can kind of get out there for a while. But I keep returning to New Thought. I keep doing that. And why is that? I think of this story in the Gospels of Jesus where Jesus had said something somewhat controversial, as he was wont to do. And what the writers in the Gospel was saying is that a bunch of people were just kind of saying, you've kind of gone too far on this one, and they leave. And so he turns to his disciples and he says, are you guys going to go too? And Peter says, where would we go? Where would we go? And I guess that's where I am with New Thought. I may wander, but I come back because honestly, where would I go? Certainly not going to become a Catholic again. Not that it was a bad thing, it's just, not. Where would I go? Because what New Thought offers is the opportunity for novelty. It is a place kind of like this community that continues to see me, to celebrate me, to recognize me. We don't have to agree with everything. But that ability to stay curious, again, something that Dr. Holmes talked about that I think sometimes we forget, is that his desire was for us as a teaching order is to be a learning order. What he said was open at the top. And, what New Thought teaches, what I appreciate, which isn't unique to it, but something that it synthesizes, is something called self-mastery. And self-mastery comes down to two things, and this is in anything. Whether you are an artist, a musician, a builder, whatever. The first is to observe someone who has mastered what you desire, and to watch them, to learn them, to pay attention to them. I also think in that is what I would say is to read, to pay attention, to expose yourself, to stay curious, not judgmental. But if you find mastery, pay attention to it. And then the second element of it is to practice it daily, 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 without exception. Stephen Pressfield, in his book, The War of Art, says, if there is evil in this world, it is resistance. And so we pay attention to where there is resistance. Because part of the path of self-mastery is that. It's sitting with and dealing with resistance, however it comes up. And it will, and it'll show itself up in so many interesting, amusing ways. Have you ever noticed that when we complete things, oftentimes when we complete them, we grieve. We're sorry that it's over. We're at the same point when we begin something new, we do it with a level of anxiety. I'm about to adventure onto something new, and I don't know where I'm going to go and what's going to happen. What I would offer is grief is real, grief is important, grief is a way that our soul reminds itself that it is capable of giving and receiving love. So I don't discount grief at all. But if you're like me, I can use these things. I can't write today because I'm grieving. I can't show up today because I'm grieving. Or, I don't know what's going to happen, so therefore I'm just going to kind of wait and see. Another magical thought, right? I'll just kind of wait and see. But maybe beyond that resistance, that endeavoring, is when we really get to the real magic of what New Thought is. Because its roots are in magic. And I don't mean magical thinking, like that you will build it, they will come, or it was meant to be, or any of that other kind of stuff. That's not magic. Magic is, the roots of magic is causing motion by the engagement of the will. That's how we pray. Thomas Troward, who was one of the great teachers in early New Thought, said, that the will is there to remind us, to remind us. So it's not so much about doing, eeny, beeny, chilly, beany kind of things, but to remember to kind of stay present, to stay focused. So, one of the beautiful things about New Thought, I think, is that we understand so deeply the mind-body connection. Back in 1907, James Allen wrote this lovely little book. And James Allen did not have an easy life. It was one with a lot of struggle. But he continued, he persevered, and he studied, he paid attention, and he stayed engaged. And he wrote a little book called As a Man Thinketh. And it's a delightful book. But there's a line in there, a couple lines in there, that I'd like to share. He says, strong, pure, and happy thoughts build the body in vigor and grace. The body is a delicate and plastic instrument which responds readily to the thoughts of which are impressed upon it. And the habits of thought will produce their effects, good or bad, upon it. So he's writing that in 1907. And what the field of science and medicine and psychology knows is sharing with us is that there is a deep mind-body connection. And that when when our thoughts create anxiety, our body begins to feel it, and experience that. And so, this is the beauty of where do we go, and what can we learn? I think this morning I might be sharing, books you should read, but I want to offer that kind of thought of where it allows us to go and what becomes of it with us. So there's this other book that I'm sort of. Do you know how some books are like old friends? And sometimes I kind of think, I worry, like I've read like Lord of the Rings 5 times, and I can think, oh, am I going to read it again? And I almost want to do that. I almost want to get a group of people that want to go on the journey with me again. But what I do know is that I don't have to read the whole thing, but I can go visit chapters. I can go visit things because I have that within the storyline. And there's a couple books like that, and one of them is one of my favorite authors, this character by the name of Colin Wilson. Colin Wilson was remarkable. A lot of his stuff is nonfiction. Anybody that is a practitioner of the occult knows his series of books on the occult. His book, The Outsider, is phenomenal. But he wrote this novel back in 1967. He was sort of doing it on a dare to write in the style of Lovecraft. But he wrote this novel that is a metaphysical horror thriller. It's called The Mind Parasites. And I love this book. But there's a quote that I want to offer from the book. He says this. He says, the first thing I realized when I was practicing Husserlian disciplines, and Edmund Husserl was a philosopher of the late 18th century, and he was into phenomenology. Basically what he was into was the study of individual consciousness. And so he goes, the first thing that I realized when I started practicing Husserlian disciplines was that human beings have been overlooking an extremely simple secret about existence, although it's obvious enough to anyone to see. The secret is this. The secret is this, that the poor quality of human life and consciousness is due to the feebleness of the beam of attention we direct at the world. Imagine that you have a powerful searchlight, but it has no reflector inside it. When you turn it on, you get a light of sorts, but it rushes off in all directions. And a lot of it is absorbed by the inside of the searchlight. Now, if you install a concave reflector, the beam is polarized and stabs forward like a bullet or a spear. The beam immediately becomes 10 times as powerful. But even this is only half a measure. For although every ray of light now follows the same path, the actual waves are out of step, like an undisciplined army walking along a street. If you now pass the light through a ruby laser, the result is that waves now march in step, and their power is increased 10,000-fold. So you see the metaphor in this, right? If thoughts are causative, imagine how focused thoughts are powerful. Dante, who wrote the Divine Comedy, says that time is love. And what he means by that is this, is he says, the things that we spend our time with are the things that we love, and we become the things we love, ordered or disordered. The things we spend our time with are the things that absorb us and call us in, and we love them, and we become the things we love. So then there is not just the power of how thoughts are causative, but how we direct them and what we direct them to. So I want to offer an arcanum, if I will. An arcanum is a term, and basically it means like an enzyme. It's something that ferments within us, creating kind of growth and openness and expansion. And it's this, that we believe that thoughts create. That's easy enough to know. Sometimes we think that we are our thoughts, but we aren't. We are our thoughts, but we may think we have no power over that. But just the opposite is true, that we can control what we're thinking. Now, this is practice, this is focus, this is energy, this is the will to do this. One of my favorite New Thought teachers was a man by the name of Neville Goddard. And I think that Neville Goddard is probably the bridge between New Thought metaphysics and quantum physics. And let me just kind of give a little aside here on that. That whether one reads the Bhagavad Gita or the Hebrew Bible or whatever scripture we read, or the Yoga Sutras, or quantum physics for that matter, if you kind of distill down and distill down and distill down where their roots are, they all kind of come from a download. And so it's about how we prepare our mind, our consciousness, to open up to this download, this experience, this numinousness, this enlightenment, satori, whatever you want to call it. Again, as Teilhard says, the deeper I descend into myself, the more I find God at the very heart of it. So it's about really paying attention. And what I like about Neville Goddard is that he was a pragmatic mystic. And what I mean by that is he didn't just kind of spout things and say, a bird in the hand's worth two in the bush, or some wise saying. What he said is, this is how you do it. These are the things that you can actually use and do them. And what's also really cool about Neville Goddard is that all of his stuff is in the public domain, because he encouraged people to record his lectures. So his stuff is really very accessible. What's also interesting about Neville Goddard is this, his curiosity took him into some very interesting places. And toward the end of his life, which he seemed to kind of predict, he was out there. He kind of left the reservation and was saying some pretty interesting things, so much so that a lot of people freaked out and left. But he never really went far from the very basics of what he taught. And his principle, the beauty or the simplicity, the elegance of his simplicity is this, is consciously place yourself in a place, what he would call a hypnagogic state. That is where the subjective mind is not being defended by the conscious mind, and create the event that you want, the experience that you're looking for, the thing that you desire. And create it so much what we would call as a prototype, and hold it. And then this is where his quantum theory comes into practice, because we create this thing, this being, this entity, Grimoire, and we place it in the future, and our subjective mind builds a bridge to it. It's fascinating, and it's amazing, and it's a powerful tool to use, that if we're longing for something, desiring something, that we can magically, consciously, through the power of the will, program our subjective mind, and it will figure out how to do it. But here's the trick. There has to be engagement, and there has to be a sort of simple, what the Buddhists call mental hygiene. And one of the things about that is not to regret. I was thinking in terms of there's this biblical story that I'm sure all of you guys know, probably wrongly, but know it nonetheless. And that is the story of Sodom and Gomorrah. And I'm not going to get into the whole Sodom and Gomorrah thing, but there's an urgency about it. So what is going to happen is that the city of Sodom is going to be destroyed, and the watchers, the angels, come and they tell Lot and his family, they say, save your lives, don't look back, and don't stay in the valley. Escape to the mountains so that you are not swept away. And that to me is such a powerful, powerful imagination. Save yourselves, leave this situation. Don't look back and don't stay in the valley. So we know metaphysically the valley is the low place, fertile indeed, but where the higher consciousness is in the mountains. So don't stay in this area. Go and don't look back. And we all know the story, Lot's wife turns into a pillar of salt, and it's such an interesting reflection on the harmonic power of regret, because you can almost imagine her thinking as she's hiking away, with her family, thinking, oh, did I leave the teapot on? What about that bridge club I belong to? Or next Friday is Mahjong. And I just love this thing, and I just love that thing. And she becomes so enamored with what she's leaving behind that she calcifies. Now, what's really interesting also is in the Hebrew story, this fabulous myth, she doesn't have a name. She's just simply called Lot's wife. And what we know is that names mean destiny. And what's interesting, again, in the Hebrew Bible is when we forget, when we slip into amnesia, we forget who we are. And that's the thing about staying in the experience of regret, is we forget who we are. And when we forget who we are, we're enslaved, so to speak, into something. We're calcified. We're resistant. We're not able to move forward and to escape. And so Neville offers us a formula. It's one that I practice a lot. He says this: And if perhaps you catch yourself imagining what you do not wish to experience, stop it. Stop it right there. And then don't give it an extra second. It may be you are in the midst of an emotion and you'd like to complete that emotion and tell that person off completely. Don't. Stop it. Break it. And that causes a sort of mental, a mental abortion, a mental miscarriage if you break it without exploding the emotion. So we've all been here, and and I love that, I love the meta prayer that was shared by Pam earlier, because it's a practice for me. Because how many times, maybe not you, but I'll say that it's me. How many times has somebody cut you off on the freeway, or someone said something or did something that's sort of offended you, and then you rehearse in your mind, when I see that person, this is what I'm going to say, and another thing, and then if you should have did this and did this or the other. For myself, my drug of choice, of which I have to keep really, really low, is politics. Because, no one appointed me king of the world, but I can certainly tell everyone what they should be doing and how they should be doing it, or how they're wrong, or this, that, or the other thing, and on and on and on and on and on and on and on. I go, stop it. Stop it. And what he's offering is think something else. Because if we get caught into that, again, the Buddhists say, the mind is like a restless monkey. Well, have you ever been to the zoo? You know what a restless monkey's like, right? He's throwing feces, he's running around, he's doing all this other kind of stuff. We don't want our mind that way, because if thoughts are things and thoughts are creative, and that's what our fixated is, imagine the mischief, mayhem, confusion, and disparity of our lives. Stop it. Well, then what do? We cultivate a new imagination. We allow ourselves to think other things. I've had this health challenge that I'm working through, and one of the things that shows up in it is waking up in the middle of the night. And in Oriental medicine, what's really interesting is that the hours that I'm waking up are associated with kidneys, and kidneys are associated with grief and anger. And so as I sit with this, I can find myself waking up and then finding out where my thoughts are and stop it. And so I've been researching a lot about, if you wake up in the middle of the night, what to do. And what you're not supposed to do is think about why you're up and how you're not getting enough sleep and how you need to go back to sleep and what am I going to do to how to do that and all this other kind of stuff. Don't do that. But think of something else. It's easy for me because there are so many things I love. I love this tree in our front yard that's just turning gold right now. I love my partner, all her New York Hebrew-ishness. I love my dogs. I love Rolo. Rolo's our newest dog. He is 9 months old and 80 pounds and still growing. And this morning when I went to go get my shirt and came back into the kitchen, he had a stick of butter in his mouth. And I love him. May he be filled with loving kindness. May he be well. May he be peaceful and at ease. May he be happy. He causes me to pray. But when we shift our consciousness, and this is the trick, right? This is the whole thing, is that our thoughts don't control us. We can direct our thoughts. And if we're going to direct our thoughts, let us direct our thoughts on those things that we desire. St. Paul, in the letter of the Philippians, his epistle there says this. He says, "From now on, brothers and sisters, if anything is excellent and if anything is admirable, focus your thoughts on these things. All that is true, all that is holy, all that is just, all that is pure, all that is lovely, and all that is worthy of praise. Think on those things. And again, just notice the resistance to do that, because it's confirming a story you tell about yourself and the world that you live. But my question is, that story getting you what you want? And the power of new thought is that we can direct our thought to the thing that we desire, not the parking places and princesses and all that other kind of nonsense, but to live authentically, to love unrelentedly, to know that there is a divine wisdom that is inspiring us and speaking to us always if we would but listen. That there is strength that supports us and carries us. And everywhere we look, there is beauty, which brings us, as Abraham Heschel says, to surprise, to amazement, to reverence. And in doing that, we remember who we truly are. And when we remember who we truly are, we are regenerating the world. So happy Hanukkah, which begins when you guys are lighting your candles next Sunday night. Happy solstice, Saturnalia, Christmas, whatever else you celebrate. And this week, think on those things. Thank you for your generous attention.